Okay, well, here we go again. The Origin of the Gods by Andrew Collins and Gregory L. Little. The image you see there is a Bigfoot that was filmed in the sky. It is not an artist rendering. It's actually was materialized in the chemtrails by Mr. Butterbud. That's not his real name, obviously. And he no longer has a YouTube channel. For some reason, that channel got taken down, probably for speaking too much truth. We know part 1, section 9, or part 1G, in the reading, what came from the stars. There are dozens of Native American legends of visitors from the stars, trips into the sky world, the journey of the souls to the upper world. However, it has only been a relatively recent year. Okay, let me try this. It has only been in relatively recent years that many Native Americans have openly discussed it. Back in the 1960s, author Brad Steiger, 1936 to 1812, began. It's going to be 2018. Where did I get 12? Where did I get 1812? Began collecting claims of extraterrestrial contact from indigenous people while he was studying their medicine practices. He later recalled the difficulty he had during the endeavor. In an interview, Steiger said, quote, "When I first brought that up, when I was interviewing people for Medicine Power, so few Native Americans wanted to talk about it, I found some Cherokee who didn't hesitate because they said, quote, I came from the stars, end quote, but the others were really reluctant, end quote." In his 2004 book, Visitors from Hidden Realms, longtime ufologist Brent Rains also mentioned a discussion he had with mythologist William Henry. Their discussion involved a visionary experience of a female Cherokee shaman. Henry mentioned that a well-known Cherokee myth, quote, tells how the first Cherokee came from the star system known as the Pleiades. Then mentioned that, quote, the first beings to emerge were thought beings, end quote. One implication of the term thought beings is that the beings are non-physical entities coming to Earth, perhaps a way of describing the energy of a soul entering a physical body. But there are some native accounts of physical visitors coming from the stars. Most of these tales are about star visitors. Most of these tales about star visitors are long and involved, and several could be interpreted as contact with ethereal entities. Here we'll only briefly describe a few of them. It is important to note that these stories have a remarkable similarity to modern UFO and alien contact cases. An ancient Yucky, that's not right. Yuchi, it's Yuchi. It's got to be much Yuchi. That's how I would pronounce it, but I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, as usual. A lot of these indigenous names are spelled one way and pronounced differently. So we go Yuchi legend tells of an unknown and mysterious being that descended to Earth. This entity taught the Yuchi skills and religious ideas, as well as explaining to them that the sun was their mother. From the Iroquois comes the story of a lone hunter who heard a voice asking him to follow it. The hunter began to rise from the ground and soon found himself gazing down at the forest. He rose still higher into the clouds and then realized he was surrounded by a group of beings that had the appearance of men. Another Iroquois myth tells of a hunter who killed a bear after a long struggle with the beast. As he was preparing his kill, he began to hear muffled voices behind him. Turning around, he saw three beings in the shape of men, clothed in strange and diaphanous, I'm not saying that right, diaphanous, translucent garments. So, I've never heard of that one before. Diaphanous. It's Diaphanous. Diaphanous garments, or translucent garments. They explained that they were entrusted with the job of maintaining harmony between humans and nature. Well, they're failing on that one. Another tale describes a flathead tribal man whose wife had recently died. He was so grief-stricken that he went into the mountains to sit until his death. Early one morning, before dawn, a bright light from the eastern sky came towards him. The light instantly moved overhead, and a being enshrouded in light suddenly materialized before him. He was instructed to go down the mountain, where he would meet another being who would deliver a message to him. After meeting the being, he was told to return to his tribe. A similar story comes from the Calypso tribe. The Kalispel is Kalispel. Kalispel tribe. A chief was grief-stricken over the death of his son. He entreated to a mountain ridge and built a circle of rocks. While sitting in the circle, two beings suddenly appeared in front of him, instructing him to return to his tribe. Several episodes of Ancient Aliens have featured modern Native Americans citing legends from tribal lore relating that there have been visitations from various star systems in the galaxy. The places of origin that are mentioned included the Pleiades, Orion, Cygnus, and a few others. Of course, that idea is one major focus of Ancient Aliens. The theme of the long-running series is that the gods of the ancient world were actually visitors from other worlds who had technology so far advanced from the humans that they were seen as gods, despite skeptics who routinely deride the idea as bunk. It is actually a very fascinating, if not compelling, idea. One of the famed science fiction Arthur C. Clarke's 3 laws was any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So it's not a stretch to imagine that primitive people around tens or even thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago might have thought if technologically advanced extraterrestrials did visit the planet, they would, as the astronomer Carl Sagan once noted, be seen as gods. So here are a few possibilities for the ancient beliefs that developed about the gods, the spiritual forces and the entities they described, and the idea about humans and other mysterious beings coming from the stars. First, it is possible that ancient astronauts did in fact come to Earth in the ancient times. That is, contacts with technologically advanced aliens in the ancient times resulted in the emergence of the cultural mythologies of powerful gods as a source of human development. Second, it is possible that the spiritual world, as described by ancient native belief systems, actually existed and that it is not yet understood in scientific terms. This spiritual world is asserted to be the source of paranormal events, the appearance of entities and star beings, and many odd light formations that have been reported for all recorded history. Third, perhaps it's all simply bunk and mental trickery at work, as most skeptics argue. Or fourth, maybe all 3 of the above possibilities have some validity. Skepticism of shamanic practices. In 2002, Stanley Kubrick, a well-known psychologist, it's not Kubrick, it's Krippner. So in 2002, Stanley Krippner, how did I get Kubrick? That's my dyslexia. Anyways, this well-known psychologist published an analysis of skeptical Western interpretations of shamans and their practices. Included in the skeptical explanations are a demonic model, that the shamans are charlatans, that they are afflicted with schizophrenia or other mental disorders, that they use soul flight, trance techniques, and that they use what he called crude technology. The demonic model was attributed to shamanistic practices by the early European clergy, who viewed all the shaman practices as devil worship, witchcraft, and sorcery. Well, that idea was waned somewhat. It remains the prime belief of some people, and it laid the foundation for later ideas developed by the skeptical community. The charlatan model assumes that shamans and practitioners of medicine are imposters who use trickery to convince others that they have supernatural powers. It is likely that this remains the primary view of many skeptics. It was the explanation I recall being given back in the 1980s when I interacted with the archaeologists who were attempting to excavate the Memphis mound site. The schizophrenia model asserts that shamans are mentally deranged and afflicted with psychosis and other mental illness. That is, their mental state has deluded them into believing things that are untrue and led them to engage in superstitious behaviors that have no genuine effect. The soul flight model implies that some shamans employ self induced trance states to create ecstatic out of body experiences. That model is cited to explain various experiences shamans relate about their journey into the spiritual world. But once again, these are hallucinatory or dream experiences that are not tied to reality. The soul flight model is the usual explanation that is given for the mental experiences that often follow exhaustive periods of rhythmic drumming, whistle blowing, chanting, dancing, and other repetitive rituals. Finally, there is the crude technology model. It refers to the use of hallucinogenic substances to create mystical experiences. While the psychedelic experiences do give an explanation of some shamanic and medicine practices, this model also implies that the experiences are not tied to reality and are merely chemically induced. Western interpretations of shamanic customs and knowledge, at least those proposed by skeptics and academics, do not leave any room for the possibility that there may be an underlying truth to what the medicine people and shamans espouse as reality. So, in essence, skeptics tell us that the constructions of the sacred spaces and model in earthwork complex and the building of stone circles and the rituals and ceremonies conducted by indigenous people all around the ancient world were essentially superstitious practices. Skeptics assert that all these rituals are based on false beliefs. In addition, in the skeptical view, there are no underlying spiritual or energy forces being tapped into and interacted with. Thus, shamanism and all of its customs stemmed from from either mental derangement or a primitive belief system that came to inaccurate conclusions about nature. It can be added here that the same ideas are often used by skeptics to explain all the ancient reports of beings coming from the sky, sudden appearances of glowing or translucent beings, the journey to the stars. Skeptics use the same explanations to dismiss virtually all modern religious beliefs and rituals, modern apparitional phenomena, paranormal events, UFO reports, and abduction reports. To skeptics, it's all mental derangement, trickery, and inability to distinguish reality. Many skeptics apply the same explanations to the idea of ancient aliens, but here they encounter a glaring weak spot in their arguments. One named Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan, the father of the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Back in 2014, I reviewed an archaeological book by skeptic Ken Fender. So Ken Fender. In his 2010 textbook, which is 285 pages long and retails at $85, Fender claimed that the true origin of the ancient astronaut hypothesis came from a 1963 article by Carl Sagan. The only other person mentioned in the section of his text is Eric von Daniken. However, it is well known that many other of proposed ancient visits by aliens long before Sagan and Van Donigen. For example, even Sagan's article mentioned that in 1959, the highly regarded Soviet mathematician and physicist Matis Agras claimed that the site of Baalbek was a spaceport for ancient astronauts, and that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was created by atomic detonations by extraterrestrials. Sagan began his 1963 article by noting that the idea of civilizations existing on other planetary solar systems in the galaxy was quite old. He mentioned that there had been a huge resurgence in the idea, and presumably from all of the UFO reports from the 1940s to the 1960s, and the release of dozens of books and hundreds of articles touting the idea of ancient astronauts. Sagan conducted a statistical analysis on the probability of intelligence and technological advanced life existing in our galaxy, and the odds that the Earth had been visited by extraterrestrials. One of his conclusions was that other civilizations, aeons more advanced than ours, must today be plying the space between the stars. And of course, what that means. Sagan asserted that starting a couple million years ago, Earth would have been visited and monitored about once every 10,000 years, but when the last ice age waned, contact would have increased dramatically because of the aliens' interest in human development. His final statistical analysis contained this astonishing sentence, quote, "The statistic presented early in this paper suggests that the Earth has been visited by various galactic civilizations many times, possibly, I guess it's infinite to 10, power of 10, 4, I don't know how to say that. I'm getting tired. 4 to the 10th power, 10th to the 4th power, or something like that, whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's all statistics. You can lie all day long about it. Ask Bill Gates, he'll tell you. During the geological time, that is 10,000 visits, he suggested that the visitors might have been seen as gods, and the ancient Babylonian stories might be a genuine clue to their presence. Paradoxically, while Sagan believed that there were certainly many technological advanced civilizations in other solar systems throughout the galaxy, and that they had likely visited Earth in the past, he didn't believe that the modern UFO phenomenon was extraterrestrial in nature. There were a couple of major reasons cited for this seemingly contradictory belief. Just one reason was that there were thousands of UFO reports being made in the 1960s and 1970s, and Sagan thought it beyond the realm of possibility that so many extraterrestrial craft were visiting the Earth at the same time. In essence, Sagan believed that there was something real in modern UFO phenomena, but that it was not a manifestation of extraterrestrial craft. That's because he knew that this whole space thing is a bunch of BS. That's why they put him up there, because he didn't have a problem. Why? That's my opinion, at least. Taking a cue from the amazing mind of Carl Sagan, what we are left with is this. There probably are many advanced civilizations out there in the cosmos, and the idea that even skeptics usually accept aliens may well have visited here in the remote past, and it's certainly possible that these older and more technologically advanced civilizations still check up on us from time to time, using remote drones with intellectual artificial intelligence, of course, saying and didn't think the modern UFO reports were alien in nature, but he certainly believed that something was at work in creating all the UFO sightings. There is something more than hoax, trickery, and delusion to some paranormal events, as well as to the UFO phenomena. Even Young acknowledged that UFOs had an underlying reality and that whatever it was, it appeared to be related to the paranormal phenomena. While Young did call the recent UFO phenomena a modern myth, he was cautious to add in his writings that all myths have a basis in reality. Another of Young's simplest and deepest statements about UFOs and the paranormal phenomena provides an elegant foundation for his basic assertion of UFOs. Quote, something is seen, one does not know what. End quote. What this means is that when we are presented with an unknown reality, an unexplained event of strange phenomena, the automatic human tendency is to project an explanation on the unknown. The interpretation or explanation is projected from out of mind on whatever is observed. It is as if we have a movie projector in our mind, and when something unusual is seen, the projector flips on so that what we then see are contents of our own mind, our beliefs, being projected onto the unknown object. The unknown object we observe serves as a screen for our own beliefs. And the specific explanation we project on it is generated from our prior learning, culture, expectations, language, and certain unconscious forces. For example, skeptics already believe that nothing in the paranormal realm is real. Thus, they immediately project an interpretation on unexplicable events as being hoaxes, delusions, mental derangement, or misinterpretations. On the other hand, when an unexplained sighting is made by someone who believes in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that explanation is projected on the event. One conclusion that can be made here is pretty simple. A person's interpretation of the unexplained phenomena and inexplicable events is influenced by their previous belief system. And is that true? Having this show with Biggie, that really hit home. 3 hours of that, he saw things one way, I saw things another way. He saw things based on his own understanding and experiences, and vice versa with me too. And yet we kind of saw things, but we didn't quite see the same things. And isn't that interesting? There's so much of this Fortean dystopic Fortean not dystopic yet, and it's not really dystopic. It's more it's just so many uncertainties, so many unclear questions. How do we live in a world like this? How did it happen? This is very disturbing to me. I don't know why it's not disturbing to everyone else, but maybe it's because people don't think about it much, I guess. They just go along with the flow just to get along, right? Anyways, our beliefs are psychologically designed and maintained in ways to have us ignore contrary facts while seeking out whatever observations will support the pre-existing belief. This psychological process is very powerful and nearly always remains out of our conscious awareness. Something is seen, one doesn't know what. The ancient beliefs of the Native American cultures, as well as all ancient cultures, came from their observations and interactions in the world. Imagine how early proto-humans millions of years ago might have explained weather phenomena, the animal kingdom, other elements of the natural world, and deeply important events like death. It's easy for skeptics and academics to explain it all away as superstitious belief systems, but that doesn't explain the underlying motivations for the building of things like the megalithic structures found all over the world. That doesn't explain the mound building cultures that constructed incredible geometric earthworks as sacred ritual spaces, nor does it explain all the paranormal events these ancient people recorded in their own way. In essence, they saw and interacted with something else that existed alongside the natural world. Their spiritual beliefs and rituals were a response to this something else. The ancients explained it using their terminology and mindset. This is partly what Jung's statement that, quote, something is seen, one doesn't know what really means. And anyways, then that quote. There is something there. We are not sure what it is, but it is interpreted in accordance with the personal cultural expectations. There's so much true when it comes to Bigfoot research. Oh my God. They planted the seeds long ago. Ancient cultures have long recorded contact with that alien force, and that itself is a seed of possible deception. The important questions are, what is it, and is it still exerting an influence in modern times? So now we move to more recent and more modern phenomena, but understand that the event we are about to explore, did I say this? Okay, sorry. But understand that the events we are about to explore aren't all that different from the legends of the Native Americans, and we'll return to the ancient world eventually. Contact with aliens. So I'm going to take a break or not. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, we'll take a break and maybe I'll add another in there. Okay, now it's part 1, section 10, contact with the aliens. The ancient astronaut hypothesis has been around a long time. It is true that the idea stems from the long-held idea that there are other inhabited planets in our solar system, as well as other solar systems full of life. For example, the Italian scholar George Dano Bruno was buried alive in 1600 for openly asserting that life existed on other planets. Bruno was an Italian philosopher and Dominican friar who wrote that the stars were actually suns and that these distant suns had planets. His trial began in 1593, and after a 6-year imprisonment, the Inquisition found him guilty of heresy. Not long after, many others wrote fictional works about life on other planets and the moon, but none of these early philosophers wrote about extraterrestrial beings coming to Earth and influencing human development. The last portion of the preceding sentence is the key thing to understand. The idea behind the ancient astronaut hypothesis is that ancient aliens visited the Earth and somehow influenced the affairs on Earth. Ron's Stories, Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters, relates that the ancient astronaut hypothesis is a theory of ancient contactees. Of course, we are often told that the stories of biblical angels and the gods of ancient Sumer, Egypt, and India, and other similar legends are evidence of ancient aliens. But in those ancient legends and tales, the visitors aren't specifically identified as interplanetary aliens. That's a modern interpretation. Many people today assume that these angelic beings were astronauts from other inhabited worlds, but the idea of a contactee implies something more. It implies that the being identified itself as coming from another planet, not from Earth. Most importantly, the ancient astronaut hypothesis implies that the extraterrestrial beings have not only visited Earth, but also have influenced its history and events. You have to go back in history quite a way to find what is probably the very first such reported encounter. The real start of the historic contactee movement and the ancient astronaut hypothesis can be traced to a very famous scientist, the first contactee. He was 55 years old when his contact with alien visitors began. He was an energetic and well-respected scientist and nobleman who had worked for universities and his national government for decades. He traveled alone frequently in his official position and had just begun a leave of absence from his appointed government position. In the past few years, he had become obsessed with dreams about death, the meaning of life, a personal and ethical dilemmas that nagged him. The ethical and moral questionings about how he had led his life swirled in his mind continuously. They needed some sort of recognition and closure, neither of which were desirable choices for the scientist. He had tried to forget strange events from his past by immersing himself in a quest to understand the natural world. So he wrote books in many areas of science and conducted research in the attempt to keep his mind occupied and his thoughts away from his own life and behavior. The strategy had worked until now. In his youth, he had often seen inexplicable lights darting around in the sky, experienced brilliant flashes of light that intruded into his room. He had visions of many kinds. He coped with these experiences by focusing on science. Few people knew about his early experiences with the paranormal. Even fewer people today recognize this aspect of his early life, but it has been well documented and even ignored by some who have studied the man. At 55, he was a highly regarded mathematician, a widely read natural scientist, and a sought-after engineer. His many books and projects made him famous throughout all of Europe and elsewhere. He had turned down the position of chairman of mathematics at the most prestigious university in his country, preferring to write books on science and take on appointed governmental tasks. He also disliked giving lectures because of a speech impediment. So a professorship was out of the question. He traveled quietly without fanfare, having contact mainly with close friends and a few ladies whose company he enjoyed, but he was filled with a secret sense of self-loathing and an irresistible impulse to make some sort of moral sense of his life. He was staying in London when his encounters with aliens began. He was eating alone in a small side room of a local tavern. Suddenly the room darkened. Then a man inexplicably appeared in front of him, sitting in a corner of the room, staring intently at him. Then the strange man said, "Don't eat too much." It was an inauspicious beginning to this remarkable story. The unexpected materialization and demeanor of the strange man frightened the scientist so much that he immediately left without saying a word. He ran back to his hotel and was suddenly exhausted. He soon fell asleep and had disturbing dreams. There were numerous written accounts of this night, and in one of these written records, a physician was called to his room by the hotel management after some sort of disturbance occurred. The physician sedated the scientist, and a policeman was assigned to stay with the man through the rest of the night because he was an official representative of his government. Some accounts relate to the man from the tavern appeared in his disturbing dreams, but other accounts are different, and the scientist's own journal is silent on what happened that first night. According to the scientist's written journal, it was on the next night that the man from the tavern again physically appeared to him. It appeared in his hotel room. The odd man manifested into physical form and sat in a chair and stared at the scientist. He was described as an ordinary human without any real distinguishing characteristics, but he was wearing purple robe. Of course he was. He was wearing purple robes and basking in glowing light. It's always got to be purple, doesn't it? The man explained that he was going to open the scientist's mind to the spiritual world. Open his mind it did, and his contactee experience began. For the next 28 years, the scientist was frequently visited by a series of physical beings that claimed that they had lived on other planets. The scientist also exclaimed that he was taken to almost every planet in the solar system. Saturn was the outermost planet he claimed to have visited. The visitors revealed that the moon was inhabited by living beings, as were virtually all of the planets and several other moons in our solar system. The scientist was told there are far distant Earths, planets inhabited by beings similar to us. The universe, they said, was filled with countless suns and inhabited planets. Many of these beings were called angels in the past, but they were not exactly the type of spiritual angels depicted in the Bible. They were physical humans who had not only played roles in the day to day life of humans on Earth, but they also had helped shape the history by visiting Earth from time to time in the ancient past. Well, they've done a terrible job, haven't they? In one of his most famous books, he wrote, "The ancients on our Earth frequently spoke with them." End of quote. Here is where the ancient astronauts hypothesis likely had its birth, with the first person who can be accurately described as a contactee. He was Emanuel Swedenborg in 1688 to 1772, a famous Swedish scientist and mystic. The initial encounter in London occurred in 1743. Like nearly all of the contactees who emerged into the flying saucer atmosphere of the 1950s, Swedenborg wrote of his interaction with the aliens and the cosmic information they bestowed on him. Thousands of pages were produced and published by him based on his visitation. Heaven and Its Wonders and Hell in 1890, and The Earth in the Universe in 1758 were just two of his classic books describing his extraterrestrial contacts and the information he was given. Today, some skeptics and many who follow and study Swedenborg ardently interpret what Swedenborg wrote about his interactions with the beings on other worlds as the result of spiritual and visionary hallucinatory experiences, and contend that he was not describing physical beings. But if you read what Swedenborg wrote, it's clear when his encounters began. He was describing physical beings and physical craft. They were people who were identical to humans on Earth. In Earth in the Universe, Swedenborg wrote, quote, "There are Earths inhabited by men, not only in this solar system, but also out of it in the starry heaven, to an immense number," end quote. He also wrote, quote, "On such occasions there appear chariots and bright horses of fire, but which they are carried away like Elijah," end quote. In Heaven and Its Wonders and Hell, he wrote, quote, I have seen a thousand times that angels are human forms, or men, for I have conversed. Where am I at now? I just lost my. For I have conversed with them as men with men, sometimes with one alone, sometimes with many in company, nor did I discover in their form anything different from the form of men. I wonder how much of this is true. I really do believe we don't look like this, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I doubt it. I have repeatedly wondered that they were such. At least it should be said that it was a fallacy or a visionary fancy. I have been permitted to see them in a state of full wakefulness when I was in the exercise of every bodily sense and in a state of clear perception, end quote. These descriptions are clear and vivid. They are definitely not describing a typical psychic or visionary contact. Swedenborg, or Borg, Swedenborg has been portrayed in many different ways, but in his latter years, Swedenborg was, as William White called it, in a chase for the soul. So he's in the chase for the soul. It was a chase for meaning, a search for ultimate truth, and an attempt to understand Christianity and how to and a host of key religious beliefs. Swedenborg himself eventually came to interpret many of the alien visitations as spiritual in nature. He gradually saw soul energies or entities as existing on all the planets, but he also stated clearly that people were also there. Like many of the modern contactees and the more recent abductees, Swedenborg felt compelled to write about his experience and gradually cast them in a spiritual light. Contactees often form a religious or study group around the revelations received from the alien. Likewise, nearly all of the latter contactees combine interplanetary travel with life on the other planets, cosmic knowledge, and the benevolence for the human race by the aliens. The aliens were, to them, truly space brothers, kindred spirits with an interest in the human soul and its ultimate significance. However, like the latter contactees, we know now that a lot of the information given by Swedenborg by his visiting entities were simply untruthful, trickster-like. In the Earth in the universe, he mentioned that humans like us lived on the moon, Mars, Venus, and Mercury, and on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. He even described their clothing. Today we know rather conclusively that planets such as Mercury, Venus, Mars, and other planets likely do not have people on them, if you believe in that scenario. But there's a possibility if these things are not really planets or stars, but are actually openings, portals, into new realms. That sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? But it can't be any more crazier than everything else they've told us in the past 500 years. At least not people like us. But Swedenborg writings were widely noticed and likely became the inspiration for many others who followed. This I have no idea how to pronounce. It's Oahspe. Oahspe. I guess I would say Oahspe 1882. When I was writing the archetype experience in the early 1980s, the most curious book I encountered was the Oahspe. The Oahspe is intimately related to the rise of Ray Palmer's once highly successful magazine, Fate. When Palmer discovered the Oahspe, he found that the American publishers of the book, Wing Anderson, had died. Palmer bought the mailing list of the people who had bought copies of the Oahspe, from Anderson's family, some 40,000 people, and used the list to launch Fate with Curtis Fuller. Palmer then started a publishing company which reissued the OSPI. OSPI, containing over 900 pages in a large, oversized volume, was first published in 1882. A New York dentist, John Bellow Newberg, in 1828 to 1891, supposedly wrote the book through automatic writing. In 1881, to be more accurate, the term automatic writing here refers to automatic typewriting, as Newberg used the newly invented typewriter to produce the manuscript. In my early career in psychology, I encountered one individual who had produced a manuscript through automatic writing. He was a clinical psychologist who related the images and sentences just appeared in his mind, and that his fingers simply typed words as if some other force was in control of them. According to the explanation given in OSPI's addendum, Newberg became interested in the spiritualist movement in the mid-1800s, and he held disappointing seances until 1870. One night in 1870, he was awakened by a large number of glowing angels who had manifested in his bedroom. Newberg was told to purify himself for 10 years by doing charity work and by becoming a vegetarian. When he had completed the task, the angels promised to return. He did as they asked, and when they returned as promised, he was told to sit at the typewriter each day at dawn, and they would control his hands. He began on January 1st, 1881, and finished on December 15th of that year. The OSPI was touted as a history of the past 24,000 years and gradually became widely read. It developed a cult following in spiritualist circles. It appears to be a source for story ideas used by several horror and scientific writers in the 1800s and 1900s. The book is advertised as the secret history of Earth, and it describes in detail the many extraterrestrial powers that have influenced the development of humanity. The book calls the extraterrestrials angels, but makes it clear that they are physical beings performing the work of their leaders, called gods. It also makes it clear that all angels begin as physical beings. Who are the angels in heaven? People who lived on earth or other corporal physical worlds. The OSPI tells the legends of flying ships coming to earth from other worlds to teach mankind in ancient times. At least 100 references in the book mention, quote, fire ships, end quote, that travel between planets and star systems and their many inhabitants. Many descriptions in the book relate that there are hundreds of millions of these extraterrestrials, and that they travel through ethereal, the vast space between stars and planets. Quote, I send down from ethereal ships, end quote. Quote, I send my angels with heavenly ships, end quote. quote, angels shall descend to the earth, end quote. Quote, behold my Otavan, my fire ship, goeth the way of her cruise of 10,000 years, end of quote. Quote, provide an arrow ship for, a lot of quotes here, I don't know if I keep on quoting this or not. Maybe this should be over. Great velocity, quote, 400 million miles a day speed at the Vegna through the Etherean worlds like a flash of light shot from the ship, end quote. The gods were received by hundreds of millions, called by receiving hosts and fire ships of great size and brilliancy, end quote. The Oathspeed reveals that just as humans build physical ships to cross oceans, the angels built physical ships to cross the vast space between planets. As mortals sail corporal ships across the corporal ocean, so sailed the ship of God in the atmospherian ocean. According to Oathsby, it was the first ships of the gods that inspired early humans to build ships to cross these seas. As ye travel from heaven to heaven in this atmosphere, even shall ye inspire mortals to build corporal ships and sail across the oceans, that the inhabitants of different divisions of the earth may become known to one another. We're going to be reading a lot about aliens over soon, aren't we? We sure are. The book also gives descriptions of the fire ships. They are similar to many modern UFO reports. Quote, a great light like a sun was seen descending from the firmament above, end quote. And the section continues, quote, the light above us descended fast towards us like a ship of fire. It came nearer and nearer. But the lights from the columns of fire formed the columns of fire, brilliant in all colors and shades and tints, and baffled many of them from seeing plainly. In a way similar to modern UFOs, the fire ships sometimes seem to vanish from sight. The Oathsby explains why. Quote, when the ship of the host of God came to the city of Ulu, that's Uloo, mortals saw it high up in the air, and they feared and ran hastily to consult the prophet of the Lord. The God caused the ship to be made unseen, and that fear might subside on the earth. Unquote. In essence, the Oathsby is presented the eternity of the ancient astronaut, the hypothesis. The gods and their legends of angels are flying around the universe in circular disc-like ships. They are called fire ships, starships, and various other names. There are many inhabited worlds throughout the universe, but the fire ships are the vehicle of gods, and the leaders, the angels, physical beings. The Oathsby reveals that just as we need ships to cross our oceans, that the gods and their angels need ships to cross the atmospheric ocean between planets. The ships sometimes remained invisible because humans would fear them if they were able to see them. According to the Oathspy, I'm not even sure if I even pronounced that right all this time. Maybe it's worth taking a chance and finding out if we can. Oathspy. Pronounce. I pronounce O-Spee. It's got to be spelled right. Pronounced right, I should say. Well, it doesn't have to be. Start with the pace. Let's pause the pace. I don't see anything. I'm just going to go with O. It's O-A-H-S-P-E. Ospe, something like that, or Ospe. I don't know, and I guess we're just going to go with it anyways. God knows. According to Ospe, early man developed the angels. In early man's development, the angels descended from the heaven in their fire ships to each man. They first raised man upright and then taught him to dwell together in cities and nations. This seems to be the earliest mention of genetic manipulation of humans by extraterrestrials, raising men upright. That's all interesting, but the underlying foundation of Oathspy's emergence was based on a hoax. I'm not asserting that Newberg hoaxed it, but the crucial event that led Newberg to become involved in spiritualism was a hoax. That is, there was a trickster element involved, just a trickster influence was present in Swedenborg's experiences. In Palmer's addendum of the Oathspy, added to his company's exact reprint of the original book, it is explained that the sensational claims made by the New York-based Fox sisters in 1848 led Newberg into the spiritualist realm. Fox sisters' experience is cited as the beginning of a new form of contact with the spiritual world. The Fox sisters and the start of American spiritualism. It was March of 1848 that two young girls in Hydesville, New York, 14-year-old Margarita Fox and her 11-year-old sister Kate began reporting raps on the walls and furniture and floor in their bedroom. This garnered a lot of attention and was the start of the heyday of America's spiritualist movement. The girls became a sensation as reporters, celebrities, skeptics, and other interested parties were given demonstrations of the phenomena. Almost everyone came away from the displays convinced of their genuineness. In the demonstrations, a method was devised to speak to the spirits and have them answer questions through the number of knocking sounds. The Fox sisters eventually conducted tours to give shows to large audiences. Interested in Swedenborg also began to surge, and a variety of mediums, spiritualists, and early hypnotists began to attract their own followers around the world. Well, earlier claims of a hoax had emerged. The Fox sisters' scheme completely collapsed in October 21 of 1888 when Margarita gave an interview with the New York World wherein she called it a horrible deception. She not only gave a complete explanation, she also demonstrated the methods they used to deceive the audiences. Both of the girls were able to crack their knuckles, toes, and other joints rather loudly, and they also cleverly dropped an apple tied to a string on the floor at will to create floor knocking sounds. As in many such cases, 1 year later, Margarita recanted her confession. Modern contactees. We're just about done with this. Well, not discussed in modern contactees in any depth, as there are a host of well-researched books on the phenomenon. So we'll not discuss the modern contactees in any depth. These contactees are modern people who claim to have had face-to-face contact with extraterrestrials who identify themselves as such. Contactees are sometimes given rides on flying saucers and taken to other planets, such as Swedenborg was given. Roy Story related, quote, shortly after the influx of UFO sightings in the late 1940s came the new phase of saucerism. Suddenly, it seemed the space people who piloted the heretofore identified craft were now introducing themselves to a select group of individuals chosen or self-appointed to spread the wisdom of the Space Brothers to all mankind. And Coral and Jim Lorenzen's 1976 book, Encounters in UFO Occupants, they use to find certain prophets. Occupants, they relate, quote, they are faced with a growing spiritual hunger, and it should not surprise us to find certain prophets profiting from it. There seems to be, however, a considerable number of contactees who are not charlatans, who conversely give accounts of experiences which were to them very real. That the contactees emerged at a time shortly after the atomic bomb had been used and when the Cold War was at its start, and is not at all surprising. That was noted by Young, recalled chapter 3, that Young thought that the fear generated by nuclear weapons created a desire for redemption from some supernatural source. Young's essential idea was that something very unusual and unknown was being seen in the skies, and that the desire for redemption was, quote, projected, in a quote, on the unknown phenomena being observed. The fact that the fear of nuclear catastrophe occurred at the same time UFOs and flying saucers were being seen was a meaningful coincidence. Young called the type of coincidence synchronicity. As I wrote back in 1984, synchronicity is more than just coincidence. It also is a type of enhanced awareness. Few academics have studied the contactees movement, and it seems that the few who do so simply don't look too deeply into it. Christopher Banner's 1995 article, quote, "The UFO contact movement from the 1950s to the present," and the quote, relates that George Adamski was the first contactee and also the first person to claim extended interaction with aliens. There is no mention of Swedenborg nor the many others who preceded Adamski. Adamski claimed to have taken photographs of UFOs in 1947, but it was in 1952 when he first claimed they have met with the aliens from the saucers. Now Adamski was surely, but Adamski was surely the star and the key personality who ignited the movement. Perhaps the seminal book on contactees is Nick Redfern. Perhaps the seminal book on contactee is by Nick Redfern. Redfern discusses many contactees, some of whom seem to have credibility, others not so much. Young took great interest in Orfeo Angelucci, a contactee who had his experiences with aliens, whose experiences with aliens began in 1952. In Angelucci's book, The Secret of the Saucers, the aliens explain that the saucers are non-material. They are controlled in such a way that they can almost instantly attract substance to take on any degree of material density necessary. In other words, the spirits, orbs, portals. That's what it is, just like everything else. Spiritual effery. For Angelucci, his aliens were spiritual in nature. His book is filled with symbolic imagery. That's why Young took so much interest in his account. As to who was truly the first contactee, it is probably Swedenborg, meaning he was the first person we know who claimed visitation by beings from other planets. As to the first modern contactee, it's debatable, and Adamski was definitely the star of the act. The Space Brothers said that they came from the Moon, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, a hidden planet called Clarion, and even from hidden places on the Earth. Other contactees claimed that their visitors were related to Atlantis and Mu. The contactees often said that they had established telepathic communications with their visitors. It's all spiritual. All of this shit is spiritual. Bigfoot, everything's spiritual. I'd rather talk to the Lord of all spirits than all this. All this trickery is just insane. I blame a lot of that and what's going on in them and how they have mentally, psychologically, and spiritually have corrupted us. That's what I'm saying. He's not saying that. Little's not saying it. I'm saying it. Okay, where are we at? Okay. The contactees often said that they had established telepathic communication with their visitors, but nearly all of them first encountered balls of light that appeared in close proximity. Their interaction with the glowing lights is perhaps the key to understanding the genuine part of their claims. Recall that Swedenborg experienced unusual flashes of brilliant light in his childhood, and even John Ballou Newborough Newborough's experience began with the appearance of angels bathed in light. So, too, did many ancient accounts of sky beings begin with flashes of light, as we have seen in previous chapters. While some readers may disagree that there is strong evidence that humans and advanced civilizations probably do not exist on other planets in our solar system, it's possible that in the very remote past some intelligent life existed on some other planets in our solar system, but currently not in the time of the contactees. I cannot really comment on the possibility that these civilizations are hidden or perhaps underground, because scientifically you can't prove something doesn't exist. You can say that there is no evidence for it, but that's about it. The point being made here isn't that all the contactees lied and made up their tales for profit or notoriety. Nor do I believe that Swedenborg and the Oathsby were deliberate lies and deceptions. However, all of these tales bear great resemblances to Native American trickster accounts. Recall that tricksters always mislead. That's their function. One has to pass the test a trickster presents before you can reach a genuine level of understanding. In his 1980 Encyclopedia of UFOs, Story defined the ancient and astronaut theory by relating that it, quote, proposes that intelligent humanoid beings from outer space came to Earth in the distant past and created man in his own images and went to develop human civilization. Story asserted that the idea seemed to have its roots in the Atlantis myth, and he cited 12 individuals who proposed the idea in articles and books prior to Sagan, 1963 article. But, as we have seen, it's probably a very, very old idea with obvious relationships to biblical, Vedic, and Babylonian tales. So, what are we to make of the story told by Swedenborg and similar tales echoed by the much later contactee movement? Were they all lying, making up a tale to sell books and to gain publicity? Were they all delusional and pathological liars and psychotic? A bug. Probably not. At least not all of them. There's a good reason to believe that Swedenborg related what happened to him as he perceived it to happen, and that he interpreted it within his own mental state at the time. But a trickster element, got a trickster bug bugging me. A trickster element is lurking in the background of all of it. John Keel made many comments in his books about the deceptive nature of the UFO field and the paranormal. In his biography of Keel, Brent Rains related, quote, he, Keel, was of the opinion that the unknown cosmic trickster was behind everything and was capable and determined to keep us constantly confused and chasing dead ends, and so that we would never discover the real truth behind any of the phenomena. In brief, it's likely that in some aspects of the contactee movement resulted from trickster interactions, but as we shall see, not all modern paranormal accounts are so easily dismissed. And that's the end of that. The three mystical, spiritual, life-changing events is next. And if you haven't figured it out yet, it's all damn spiritual. Good luck finding an alien spacecraft, you know what I mean? Made out of tin.
You're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.
Let's go.